Good morning, good afternoon, or good morning if you're on the Pacific Coast. Good to see you today. My name is Monica Wheaton. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success for ECI Software Solutions in the Residential Home Construction Division. I love doing these types of webinars. This one is called Why Starts is the Only Number That Matters. Not only do I love it because we get to talk about data, but I love it because we get to talk with you, our builder friends, about how you can, how we can help you run a better business and leverage some of our software tools better as you're making decisions in the future and things like that. And so very excited for this. You should be able to hear me. Just a couple logistics as we get started though. You should be able to hear me. This is different than a Teams call. We don't have a chat feature, but we do have a pull-out bar on the side. We normally run our webinars this way, so many of you know how to do it, but just pull that out if you have any questions. I'll monitor those throughout. Most of them we'll save to the end and ask then, but if you have a question that's a point of clarification, I will ask it at that time because I'm happy to do so. And we are doing an on-demand session, so we will record this and you can share it out, watch it again. I probably will watch it a couple times because I know we're gonna cover quite a bit, and I'll learn quite a bit watching it a couple times. So feel free to do that. And if you have any questions, issues, or problems, you can always email me during this so we can make sure you're all set up to hear everything and see everything as well. So I think that's all the logistics I needed to cover. And so again, I want to introduce our topic today, which is why starts is the only metric that matters. And then I've got two of my good friends here with us from the Mainspring group. So I believe many of you have probably met Matt Collins, and so I'll have Matt introduce himself and say a quick hello, and then also Jason Sherman over on my other side. So thank you guys for being here today, and very much looking forward to covering, or actually exploring, this assertion that you have here. Because I agree that starts are important, but I'm not sure if I agree that it's the only metrics that matter. So you do have some convincing to do here as we go through the presentation. So do you want to say a quick hello and then we'll get started?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. Yeah, it's a bold claim, and I'll do my best. It might be a little tongue-in-cheek, just for a little bit of fun, to be a little provocative to the operators out there, but we'll see what we conclude together. So definitely appreciate you and Terrell and the entire ECI team. We love being on your platform and speaking to all your users and customers out there. So thank you very much from both the whole team, Jason and I, and the whole team.
Cool. Thank you, and thanks for being here with us today. So yeah, why don't we just go ahead and dive in?
Let's do it. Okay, so why starts, and I agree, Monica said earlier, should have, are only or is only, I agree. And it's meant to be a little provocative to a degree. Why starts is the only number that matters. Probably should have put that in all caps just to even make it a little bit more pointed. And we'll get into that. And we are the Mainspring group, and probably this is not the first time you're seeing us, but we are a specialty consulting firm that works with regional home builders. Many of our customers are, in fact, Mark Systems users, and so we really enjoy working with many of the same companies, and we help private regional home builders identify and take the right next step. A lot of times that definitely is focused on the operations, everything from sales and offerings and readiness all the way through warranty and beyond. Here is the team, the old guys over there on the far left, and the rest of the team that many of you probably have interacted with. And we did Patty, I should probably take away as if she's brand new. She's on the team as well, Patty Sorensen. So we're happy to have this group and happy to work with Mark Systems. And if any of the customers that we share are watching this, it's good to see you. So as a firm, we do a lot of consulting, best practices, cleanup work, data work, and we also offer a dashboard called the Pulse. It sits right on top of Mark Systems. So some time ago, it's probably been a little while now, but Mark Systems enabled all of their data that's in Mark Systems that you use on a daily basis to be available for through Excel, or a lot of folks use Power BI and other things. We connect to that data So we're sitting right on top of your real Mark Systems data, and we provide decision-oriented dashboards. And if you're interested in those, happy to talk to you. But today we are talking about why starts is the only number that matters. And there was I was at a event, ECI Connect, I think in 24, and I was talking to an individual, and they mentioned a comment that some builders were making, which was, what metrics should we pay attention to? And back in the day, I jokingly, but say, I got enough gray in my beard, I've been around a little while. Metrics used to be kind of hard to come by. It was, you had to go figure it out, and keep them was hard. You did it Excel or on your little 3x5 card on your desk. They were very difficult to come by because the data wasn't accessible like it is today. So if you're a Mark Systems user and you use that replicated database that they made available for their users, now you got access to all the numbers, which means you can now get many metrics. And what you're actually seeing on the screen is a legitimate list of 1,000 metrics that are available to home builders. And so the old days of I only have access to a handful of metrics isn't the case anymore. We literally have 1,000+ metrics, and any one of these, here's the rub, any one of those are decent and are interesting and could even potentially compel action to be taken. So every one in and of itself, sure, measure that. That sounds like a very good one to measure. But which ones really matter and which ones at the end come down to driving the results that we need. And so our view, there is a handful of critical leading indicators which provide both clarity into what the future holds, are we going to hit plan or not, and also give you insight into what actions could or should be taken in order to cause the plan to come to fruition. So we are starting a new series called Metrics That Matter. And we are talking about starts, but Monica, a little tongue-in-cheek, there's other ones that also matter. So in the future, we'll also be talking about the only number that matters is deviation days on your schedule or soft schedule, or your budget integrity and measuring the quality of your budgets, or starts automation, how automated are your start packages, and there's others that we're going to look at. So this is the first in a series, and so at this point, since it's the first one, it will be the only one that matters. But we're looking forward to future opportunities to present to you these others as well. But as it goes for starts today, we're going to first look at the goal. You'll see here in a minute, like actually the goal, and then the book the goal. We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk through planning for starts, and then measuring starts, and then taking action. And then we'll have a little bit of a wrap up. So first, I don't know if any of you know, I know Monica knows Steve, and I'm sure others do. Steve Nordstrom, an old friend of mine. He said actually he commented on the first LinkedIn post we did about this series. He made this comment. It was a fun quote. You'll rarely see a house that starts but doesn't finish, but you can't finish one that doesn't start. Good for Steve. That's exactly right. You can't close a house that you didn't start. And so that's, in that way, starts is the only number that matters, because closings really for the business is the number that matters, and you can't have those without starts. So to start off with the goal, quite literally the goal, Elliot Goldratt, it's an old book. This is definitely one of the top 5 business books I've read, potentially one of the top maybe 1 or 2. Good to Great is another one I'm a very huge fan of, and there's a handful. This one's up there. So if you haven't read it, get a copy, listen to the Audible version, whatever's easiest. It's a phenomenal read, listen, and it's long, but the way that Goldratt put this together, if you like Lencioni type writings where it's a novel, a story, but a business, that's this. It's about a factory with a guy named Alex who has to solve all kinds of challenges. And in chapter 13 in this book, Alex, who runs his factory, he takes his kid's backpacking troop, or a Boy Scout troop, on a backpacking adventure, and he gets frustrated. And if you've ever gone backpacking with more than 3 or 4 people get strung out, so the ones in the front get the rest often, the ones in the back have to catch up, and then the ones that are in the front are ready to go again. And it's constant accordion effect. And that was this experience for Alex when he's on his backpacking trip. And he began to realize and think through, there's a particular one of the Boy Scouts, his name was Herbie. If you remember the book, you remember Herbie. He was the slowest of the backpackers. And so eventually what he did to keep the line all connected, he put Herbie at the very front, meaning that the entire system could only make the distance that Herbie could make. And that is exactly what starts are for the home builder. Starts are Herbie. The entire organization has to rally around, focus on, and subordinate to our starts rate, no matter what it is. We cannot close more homes than we start. We can't even frame more homes than we start. And if we have more design galleries than homes that we start, now we got a huge backlog. That's a problem. So starts are at the absolute center of, and we're going to plan towards our starts, and everything in the organization has to subordinate to starts. We'll dig into that a little bit more, but it is truly the drumbeat of the entire organization. Remember this, the business relies on settlements, closings, but closings relies on starts. And so that's where we're going to focus. So first, let's talk about plans. Now, I grabbed a slide out of, Monica, if you remember the one webinar we did, it was fall of last year. I think it was called Foresight Can Be 2020, a little fun title again. And in that presentation, we talked through how to set up a business plan. And we actually just did a repeat of this one here not long ago. And any of these webinars, if ECI hosts it or if they're on our own platform or whatever, we have them on our resources page on our website. You can watch them all for free. I know Mark Systems has the ones that they've done, been a part of as well. But if you want to watch that one, you can watch it. And it's focused specifically on how to build a business plan based off of 5 variables. And so initially in that conversation, we said, all right, so first thing we got to know is what are communities and what's our closing goals for each of those communities. And we can then take the closings goals and we can say, all right, if we know our ASP by community and we know our units, that means we can get our revenue number. And if we know our gross margin by community, we're going to make some guesses, educated guesses, and we're going to be able to have the cost of goods, which means we have our gross margin target for the year. And then if we know our expenses, we can go all the way down to net profit projections for the year. The point today isn't the business plan. The point today is that entire business plan relies on closings. It's when we realize revenue. It's when we realize COGS. It's how we drive and build the business plan. And so if you watch that one, or if you watch the repeat and you want a copy of the Excel sheet that I use in that webinar, shoot me an email and I'll send you a copy of it. It's what I didn't show in that webinar is another element to that business plan, because I was focusing on the P&L, the business plan itself. And that is, if you take the closings goals, there's a starts goals that goes along with it. And so in reality, you open up that Excel and you get the sales targets and the starts. And what I want you to show you is that a closing is months ahead of the start for that same unit, and the difference is your production cycle time. Now, in other cases, you may have some other adjustments where you maybe have specs or model homes that you build or sell or whatever, but the simple view here is that for a closing to occur, and if we have a 90-day cycle time, then we're going to back up 3 months and say that's when we got to start the house. Furthermore, if we have say a 60-day soft schedule, meaning the time between contract and start, we have to back up from the start 2 months and we get our sales goal. So we can use the business plan to know what we got to produce, but the whole point is for us to know how many houses do we have to start and when and where. And so we base our plan around closings, yes, but it's the starts that matter, and starts ends up as the center for your organization. Everything, as I used this phrase before, everything subordinates to the start. Operationally, it's our focus. P&L business plan focuses closings, no doubt. Operationally, it is starts. And so our entire land acquisition, land development, the entire process has to subordinate the starts. What's our starts goals? Our schedules for our buyers to come in and have meetings with our sales team or the design gallery, those all have to subordinate to starts. They are meant to feed our starts machine. Our entire sales and marketing strategy, our spec home strategy, all is driven by what starts need to be and where they need to be when. Our tech stack, What systems do we use? What software we use? If you're watching this video, it's very likely that you're a Mark Systems user or you're interested in Mark Systems. That's part of your tech stack. That system, whatever your system is, has to be based off of and managed towards starts like Mark Systems does. And also your team. You know, how many individuals do we need? What's our scalability? All is based off how many starts. And so a lot of times we're helping builders operationally, you know, as a consulting firm, and we're talking to them. And when you're building 40 homes a year and you have an individual that's responsible to produce those, that means you need a 40-to-1 ratio. You want to get that as high, make that individual as efficient as possible so that how many starts can be produced. And you do that through, you know, good material lists, good schedules, good soft schedules, and you use Mark Systems to its fullest. And the whole point of using Mark Systems very well is to keep costs down, variances down, and to be able to increase scalability, automation, and getting how many houses can we produce with the back office team that we have. And the better your system, the lower that number goes. And so it's driven by your scalability. The number of people that are in your P&E team, purchasing and estimating team, whoever's responsible for starts, is all based on starts. And so starts is the center of your universe for an operator like us. So once you have that plan and you know what your starts goal is, you then get into the second phase, which is measuring. So I don't know if this has been around a long time, this OODA loop, and it's got different names, but I think most of the best that I can tell, it all goes back to Colonel John Boyd, a Korean War fighter pilot, who then went on to be an instructor at the fighter weapons school, became an analyst, and his goal was to, after the Korean War, if you read Jeff Sutherland's book, Scrum, he talks a lot about this, but after the Korean War, the numbers for fighter pilots, the ratio of survivability and the ratio for the wins that they had wasn't great. And so John Boyd really focused on improving the outcomes of these dogfights. And what he concluded was successful outcomes for fighter pilots, meaning they are able to return after the fight and land their plane. It's skewed towards those who can make correct and fast decisions, execute and repeat. He realized that the victory in that dynamic environment, and we think we got it tough. Imagine having people shooting at your airplane. So that's a very dynamic environment. The success in that dynamic environment wasn't just based on the tactics or the equipment. If you have Mark Systems, you have an excellent system, but that's not good enough. You have to, and tactics, how to use it. You have to actually have the individuals and set the data up well and measure well. So it's not just the tactics or the equipment, but it depends how fast and accurately, and I'm reading a quote here, how fast and accurately someone could process unfolding reality and change plans. And so over a decade, he came up with the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. This is at the basis of the measurement. So why do we not have 1,000 metrics? Because the point of a metric is to push action. So the observe and orient, in this case, observe and orient means measuring. We're watching, we're looking at the analytics. What metrics that matter? Starts, what units are coming, what's have come, what's our frequency, what's our rate. We want to measure where that by the community. How are we doing month to date, year to date? What homes are on tap? What steps are necessary to release those homes? We're observing and orienting ourselves so that we can pull the levers, take action, make a decision, and be able to take action so that we can. Chuck Shin used to say, always, he's taught me an unbelievable amount. I know a lot to him and just the education he's provided me over the years. He always said, compel events to conform to the plan. So anytime I use that phrase, I really want to make sure that Chuck gets a credit for it, because it's a very important phrase. We need to compel the events to conform to the plan. The start plan that you have or the business plan is static, but reality isn't. It's dynamic. And so we have to be able to adjust, but adjusting without observing and then orienting, or as dashboards go, measuring and analyzing, you're just simply wishing on luck. And so hope and luck, hope is not a strategy. Instead, we make decisions based on the data. And then once we make those decisions, we take action. And then once we take action, we observe again. And it's the OODA loop. This is a daily, no, it's now, it's constantly, we are constantly adjusting. So what are we measuring? as we have this plan, the plan, and then the goal, what are we measuring? Well, starts actual versus plan. And we're looking at if our business plan was driven by, as a home builder could say, well, I plan to do 100 units this year, next year, whatever. Fantastic. Which communities and what rate, how many per month or which months? And so you get the starts goal, and your starts goals really need to be down to the community and the month of release of the start. And so once you have that plan, you're obviously measuring, and the most important is how are we doing against that plan? Just simply measuring that isn't sufficient, because that tells you where you're over, you're under, will we hit closings goal or not? So then we also got to measure and know which homes are in our pipeline, the homes that are on deck. So you have to know your pipeline, know it implicitly. What homes are in WIP, where are they at, which ones are nearing release, where is the system breaking down, what actions need to be taken. A lot of times, home builders will really heavily rely on emails and triggers for the next step. And since in most cases, the WIP in these, the homes here in the soft schedule, the time between contract and release, or the time between like spec, lining out the spec and release the home to start, since there's not real costs associated with that, the time kind of becomes less important. So often builders will really focus on the production schedule, but not as hard on the soft schedule. And it's as, if not more important than that construction schedule. And so we want to know which homes are on deck. We want to know what steps are necessary to release those next homes. And we don't want to rely on people saying, hey, did you submit that permit? No, let's use a system. Also, not to do another plug, but it's a free event, so feel free to go back in time and watch it. It's on the resources page. We did a webinar on soft schedule, like how to build it. What activities should you have in addition to the business plan, that foresight can be 2020, where I had an Excel sheet that I emailed you. We also have a template of a soft schedule, and I'd be happy to send that to you as well. No cost, anything, just use it. But in Mark Systems, the best builders use Mark Systems schedule for the soft schedule as well. And so the best practice is that your cycle time is actually contract to close, whatever that is, 30 days, 45, 60 days to release the home to production, and then the entire construction schedule, and then you have closing at the end. That's the best practice. And so if you're using Mark Systems to its fullest, and you have that soft schedule in the schedule, then you're able to say who needs to submit for permits and when. And then we're not relying on emails. Emails ultimately are indications that the system broke down. It's like a variance in the production world. It's like a variance. We shouldn't need an email to say something. We use the schedule, just like we don't ideally want to email the framer to show up at a job. We want them to look at ITK and see that they need to show up to the job and the job's ready. Same exact thing for the person submitting permits. They use the schedule. They know that they can submit for permits because the predecessors are complete. They can submit for permits. Reducing all the downtime in that soft schedule will make a huge impact on your starts. And so there's a little bit of a sidestep here in what we're talking about, but measuring that pre-production schedule and knowing which homes are there is a very critical piece of using your starts and leveraging the starts. Spec homes, we are keeping an eye on the spec homes, both what status those are. Again, best practice. If you're a builder that uses spec homes routinely, maybe you can use them to backfill a start slot that didn't get filled because the home wasn't ready for a buyer. But we put specs in the process, and we can pull the lever on the hopper when we want a spec home to come. Spec homes and knowing your hopper is a critical piece. And then I spoke to this a lot, soft schedule and hitting durations. So we don't want homes sitting in la-la land. What's la-la land? It's when somebody says, did we ever release, site 18 in Devonshire? Oh man, we didn't submit for permits. That's la-la land, where we don't know, as a matter of fact, where we're at. So I want to show you a couple of the dashboards that we have in the Pulse. Again, if you use Mark Systems, there's reports in Mark Systems. If you use Mark Systems and also get the data replication, you can do it in Excel and Power BI stuff. Our dashboard, the Pulse, We built, over the last 3 years, there's 30 plus dashboards. It's kind of a plug and play. You just put it right in Mark Systems and gives you the dashboards right away. I'm going to give you I'm going to show you 2 of the dashboards out of the Pulse. This one is your starts goals, actual versus plan. You can look at current month to date as well as year to date, and you can look across any community and across your company as a whole, and you're able to see where we at actual versus plan. You could drill in and you could say what occurred, which houses released to production, and it can tell you what occurred, but this is obviously your leading indicator, your closings. You can't close a house that you didn't start. So this is telling us what our closings will be based on the houses that we start. But also on the other hand, we want to know those homes that are in that soft schedule. And so if you have a pre-production schedule and there's milestones that you're using, the data here isn't great as far as just the pre-production schedule and our test data that we have for Watchmaker. It's not a real builder, but you get the idea. You can look at the job statuses dashboard. It can tell you which homes are nearing release to production, when should they release to production, how far off are we if the jobs are on hold. So the Pulse answers those questions: which ones are releasing, which ones are on deck. The last thing that we're going to talk through now is the action. In that OODA loop, we observed, we oriented, we decided, and now we got to take action. And again, plans are static, but reality isn't. So actions, back to Chuck's point, you got to compel the events to conform to the plan. If everything's happening according to plan, you don't need to take action. You only need to take action when things get off plan. We didn't finish a development in time, and so we're 3 months behind on our starts process. What levers do we have to be able to pull? So I'm going to give you a few potential, I say levers, what I mean is we can make some adjustments. We can pull this lever, turn this dial, call it dials if you want, whatever. The point is that when we need to change behavior in our actions so that we can even hit business plan despite the fact that some things went sideways, what are those? And so several examples, but this is definitely not a comprehensive list. There's only 3 of them up here, and there's a million versions of these and the adaptations of these adjustments, but then there's a ton of other solutions that you can have. So several examples. When you fall behind and you know that your starts goals, you've fallen behind. Side note, when's the worst time to figure out that you're behind on starts? Is when you didn't hit your closings goal because you're 4 months too late. So we want to find out where we will be behind and then what choices can we make. So the first is paper specs. A paper spec. Now, if I tell you this and you're listening, you're like, yeah, that will never work in my municipality. Like, okay, you're right. Nothing ever works. Let's just keep doing what we're doing and keep getting the results we're in. Be open-minded. Make the adjustments to the ideas in a way that works best for your environment. Make zero assumptions about what the municipality, the state, city, township, county, whatever it is, will or won't do. But just think open-minded for a moment and don't figure out why this won't work. But if you need it, figure out how can we make it work or what variation of it can we make work. But what a paper spec is we have homes that are pre-permitted, pre-drawn, pre-planned, maybe even pre-estimated with budgets that we can release. And we put them in a hopper that if we have a start slot, because remember that Herbie, we need to keep on that pace. And if you ever hear the phrase tack time, T-A-K-T, tack time, it's the pace, the frequency that we need to release our widgets to production, right? So if we want to close 100 homes a year, just easy math, let's say we got to release 2 homes a week. And so if we miss that cadence, it's the metronome, the starts, the click, click, click. If we miss one, what can we do to backfill that hole? Paper specs is a solution. So in this case, you have several home sites that are predetermined that a future spec could go on them. If you end up selling that home site to a buyer, fantastic. You can throw away the paper spec and you can move forward with the contract. But you have a handful of these on lots that maybe they're not available for sale right now, but you can release them if you have to in a moment's notice. So that's what a paper spec is. Mark Systems, I get choked up sometimes around this exciting stuff. Okay, Mark Systems allows builders to do stage releases. So if you're familiar with that phrase, whew, Monica, I'll make it, I promise, but it might be a little rough here.
Yeah, I can give you a second if you need. I can ask a couple questions and talk about
I'll take a quick sip.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, I'm lubricated.
Okay,
So,
let me know. I'm here.
Thank you. All right, so stage releases. Mark Systems allows you to release a home to production in stages. So if you don't have everything all the way to the finished color of the paint, you can break your release down into a handful of stages. Now, optimally, obviously, if you're an estimator purchaser, I prefer to look at a home and pick it up one time. So ideal scenario is one. That's the best case. If you need to leverage the possibility of stage releases to make adjustments so that you can get homes released to production, then use it. And so the ideal scenario is one, but if you got to compel events to conform to plan, you're going to need to potentially do varying stage releases. And there's a whole method of using these to where you can really leverage them to benefit you. And so I'll give you a couple quick examples. One is, if you have, some builders don't want to finish out all spec homes because the customers really want to make a decision about their cabinets, countertop finish, or flooring. Some of those very key. Like, you could put a decent faucet in and you can make that look nice in the bathrooms or whatever the case is. There's some decisions that they don't really care a lot about, but in your market, countertops and cabinets is critical, and flooring, whatever it is. You can release on a stage release everything up to that action, that activity in the schedule, and then you allow the customer who buys a spec home to make those choices, and then you do that final stage. Maybe it's stage F. A lot of times we find people using stage F for that final. Perfectly reasonable, and what that allows you is to release a home ahead of schedule as a spec, and then finish it out once their choices. But you can also use stage releases when there's a customer, a contract. Perhaps your design process is 60 days, and you realize that you can release that home up through maybe framing, because none of the choices that are made in the design gallery would affect anything up through framing. Those are all, like, sunroom and stuff at either a contract or back when you made the structural options. Mark Systems also allows you to leverage stages, not in just what you release to production, but the options that are available. So you could release a home to production, even if it's got a buyer on it, earlier than you would if you had to wait for the complete package. So make these judgments and decisions in a way that produce the best outcome. There's obviously pros and cons to each of those. What's the ultimate number of stage releases? I mean, I don't know what the system limits you to, but it'd be the number of POs that you have. Well, obviously, we're not going to release 80 stages, but maybe 2 helps your process, and it allows you to stay on that tack time. It allows you to meet the Herbie pace of your starts that you need. A version of that you would use stage releases is actually batching foundations. Now, I've been around a little while, worked with builders in varying climates, and they sometimes do this just simply out of weather. You can't put a foundation in between January and March. I've seen that up in Louisiana, and I've seen it up in Michigan. So depending on where you're at geographically, you may already do this, but you can even potentially do this if you don't need to weather-wise, but it's a benefit to you to where maybe your customers don't even have their structure options done that affect, but they've done the ones that affect the floor plan itself. And you could maybe get those foundations in 5, 10, 15 at a time. I've worked with a builder that would do this just simply to reduce the overall costs. They could bring a trade in to do a foundation a day, and if they did 50 in a row, it would reduce costs. So again, there's benefits to some of these. This is just a version of stage releases, but it's a batch of your foundations that could potentially be a huge benefit in order to make sure you're hitting your start schedule. And for a fourth one because I had a fourth block, but also, what else? If you're creative and you understand the mission, you understand the goal, there is many levers available to you that help you to be able to meet your starts goals. So just choose which of these levers Remember the OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. You got to first plan. The plan is in closings, but the plan leads towards, or the plan is closings, but the business plan pushes then to starts. So you focus on your starts. You measure your starts. As things go south, you have to pull levers. You have to adapt. The most important part of these levers is that you have to prepare to use them even if you don't. I mean, the age-old adage that we hope for the best, plan for the worst. Set your systems up that these are possible to you and the other versions that you come up with, but that they're not the default. They're levers that you can take if you got to take action. So, Monica, I don't know if any questions came in. I spoke as quickly as I could to make sure we had any time, and really appreciate it. Yeah, love to have any dialogue or questions or any thoughts that anyone had to share.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Matt. This was a great presentation. And I just have to say, I mean, it's obvious what you talked about starts really driving the whole thing, but like it blew my mind when you really put it in those terms and showed that, because really, you're right, we plan on closings, but you can't close a house that you don't start, right? I mean, that's really truly the point. So like even planning for 2026 in our first quarter, if we haven't started the house already, then it can't be really included as one of the closings that we're planning for 2026, which is important. But and then also, can you talk a little bit more about, you had talked about the soft schedule, and I know that was the conversation that we've had before on other programs. Could you just talk a little bit more about how do you really get control over that? Because so much of that is out of our control with working with the approvals and regulations and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially ARC type approvals or customers themselves or townships permit turnaround times. There's a lot of, and I think if a company wasn't really focused on their soft schedule, that's usually where their fallback is. Like, why if you can't control 80% of it anyway? You know, it's just a act of futility. So the argument that I make is, okay, there are definitely other people. However, let's control what we can, not worry about what we can't. And I won't have a schedule activity. Like, I'm a huge fan of using Mark System's schedule for the soft schedule. Like, it's a very big deal to me because I've seen the impact on an operation. So one of the tips is, if there's any action in the soft schedule that is dependent on an outside person, someone that isn't going to log in ITK and see, like, the chance of getting a county to log into ITK and say, oh wow, I got to get this permit done, it's 0.00. It will not happen. And so in those cases, you instead, and so you don't build a soft schedule that's just called permit, and then because everyone's good with it not happening and it just keeps pushing. But instead, in that video, if the folks watch that, I talk about triggers and completions. So the action isn't permit, but there's an action for who is accountable in my team to submit the permit. There's an action, a step, an activity called submit permit. And then there's a second one that's called receive permit. And we put the lead lag in there based off what we expect, and we could actually adjust that by the development or community. But instead of just simply, yep, it's in permit, it's a lot of land, I don't know where that's at, that there's actually an action. Get everything submitted and then finished out. And another example of that I think is helpful is design gallery meetings. We can't necessarily control when a customer will come in, like, hey, customer, come in at 10 a.m. on the 13th for your design gallery meeting, and if you don't, I'll make the choices for you. Like, obviously, that doesn't happen. But the action is calling to schedule and then scheduling it and then having it. So those actions that are, we don't want anything in Mark Systems or in ITK in the schedule side that doesn't have a definite time that it starts and stops. And so we can look at those activities, schedule meeting, submit permit, those sort of things as specific actions. And we remove 100% of the time that's downtime based on us not taking action. And so it's not 80%, we have a lot more control over that than kind of just than the typical perspective. What if it's 50-50, and I got 50% of control of my soft schedule, and I remove every down day, and that 50% I'm much better off. So it's really measuring each activity.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. And that would be very helpful to make it much more predictable. Just a reminder to everybody, I think I said that if you have a question, it's on that site control panel. You can just type your question in that questions box and we will get it and then we can ask it at the time. The question that I had, another one that I had was, I really like the different levers that you said about the paper specs and the foundations and things, because it really, you know, like you said, you really need to have a plan to meet your closing if your sales aren't there, right? And there has to be, though, also some measurements or some indicators where if you're not seeing those starts happen because of sales, you know, what do you do as far as making plans for these levers? Like how many paper specs, like do you have, you know, goals and targets kind of around some of these levers and where you sort of start to back off those levers?
Yeah. I won't mention any names here, you know, protect the guilty, but I remember you and I were in this business together back, you know, downturn era, and we both saw builders in 07. If you start to date yourself here, but in 07, if you didn't have the starts you need, just threw another spec out. Then you end up with 120 specs and you go out of business. So there's one of those levers, for instance, is paper specs. There's also safeguards around how many of those do we have and what my tolerance is for a ratio of within a community. How many specs will I allow at any given time? I'm okay. A lot of times that's kind of regulated by the construction lines from the banks. You know, they're going to say, I'll give you 3 specs on this line. So you don't just have free money. It's not just everywhere. So, and nobody wants to fund these things with their own cash. So there is already some like oversight that keeps that number down, probably because of 07 and that time frame. But you know, you can have up to 3. So then you say, okay, we're not going to have any unless we need it, and we'll release up to 3. But in that case, if you did that and you released all 3, and you then need another lever, that lever's done. There is nothing left behind it. You can't put another 4th one out. You don't have the funding for it. You know, and a lot of challenges do come. So yes, in each of these, so in that planning process, because if you just start releasing specs because you're not thinking and you just got to get starts out the door because, you know, Mainspring said starts is the only thing that matters, so let's just keep going. No, you got to have some controls and safe place. And that's the work that's done when you don't need it. If you're figuring that out when you need it, you're pretty screwed. So do the work in advance.
Awesome, cool. And then the other question was around the starts again. What are some of the things that we should be looking at as far as the sales are concerned on the sales side? So making sure that, you know, obviously we want all the starts to happen. We want them all to be sales. Where are the indicators that the sales team should be looking at before they realize that a start isn't happening because of a sale, that they don't have the sale for the start, right?
Yeah, and that focus and work is probably more at that, you know, VP senior level sales to marketing, where there's the operations leader and that individual, because your sales team doesn't end up getting too focused or caring about, you know, starts, but their plan that they're working towards should care about it. You know, so I would not anticipate in most cases, maybe in a small company, you know, you got 3 salespeople and the operations person doing 40 houses. Like, okay, definitely everyone's on the same page. But if you're doing 3, 4, 500, those individuals that are frontline that are selling to homes have really no understanding or care, not understanding, they're smart people, care about what the start release is. So in those cases, then they have their own plan to conform to, and they have their in the Pulse, but in any solution, we have also a sales, is very similar look to that one dashboard. It's sales. What's the sales in the community? How many did I plan for? And a lot of times, you know, senior leaders in the sales and marketing, they'll have a marketing strategy to produce the leads that are necessary to produce the contracts, which are necessary to produce the net sales within a community. And if the sales team is conforming to that, then they are by nature conforming to the starts goal. So I don't think that the sales team is getting engaged all that much. However, they are, and they don't necessarily know it because they're conforming to their own business plan for their community. And then we have to give them a solution to see it. You know, the telling somebody, hey, how'd you do this quarter? And like, I don't know, let me go add them up. Like, holy cow, what are you doing? That needs to be at the forefront of our mind. I'm 3 behind plan, but here's my pipeline, and here's who's going to be. And that gives us the ability to get ahead of the start, so we don't miss the starts by surprise. A spec and a sale are pretty much the same thing in that if you sell a spec, you start a home, or excuse me, if you sell a spec, you start another spec. If you sell a home, you start a house. So no matter what, every sale does trigger a spec, in that or every sale has to trigger the result of a sale needs to be a start is occurring, regardless if it was a spec or not, because most times we have a tolerance to 3 specs in this community. So if I spell 1, I want that 2, and now I go back up to 3. If we are relying on that, sales can always be connected to the cadence of starts, regardless if it's spec homes or contracts.
Yeah, great point. And so the other question that I have is on the foundations. When you say that starting a foundation is a great way to sort of fill that spot as well. And does that, if you start a foundation without a sale, does that cut then the time to close when you finally do make the sale? Basically, I mean, you're just getting ahead of the thing. So it's not like you have a planned close in September. You're still aiming for that September close with the foundation.
That's right. Yeah, what's a foundation? It's other than a very, very early spec. This sucker's definitely at the very early stages. Was working with a builder who innovative design created 3 different floor plans that would all fit on a precise same foundation. So they could do a 1-story house, a 1.5-story, or a 2-story. But the footprint was identical, so they could stockpile foundations and then still allow customers to choose the model that they wanted, one of these 3 models. And then the option that they had, the option worked regardless of the foundation, or the foundation, and in one case, if I remember right, they even had a stubbed out drain line that was there and it wasn't going to be used. One or the other was going to be used based on the bathroom layout, but it allowed an option to be selected even though the foundation was in. That's pretty innovative, very creative solution to allow them to stockpile foundations and then get that production cycle time from whatever 120 down to 90 or whatever the case is, because they're thinking through it. And all of that required incredible amount of forethought. So again, it's something that if you're stuck and you're like, no, let's just throw a bunch of foundations out there, that won't go well. I lived in that organization. It doesn't go well. Don't do that. Really think about it now so that your 2026 starts, if they slip Q2, Q3, and we need to close, we need to hit the plan next year, that we're prepared to do so and we know what our options are. Thinking about the option. I used to say, kind of in the same vein, if you're responsible for supply chain and vendors and you're Googling because a superintendent just called you and they don't have a framer, and you're Googling framers near me, you're a really bad situation. That forethought was definitely necessary. So, let's just throw foundations out. You're way behind. You should have done that months ago. So, but right now we can start now and create the plan so that we can hit 2026 goals. We have plenty of time to do so now.
Well, I love what you said about making it a standard foundation for many different options as well, because that's very strategic, and because you don't want to cut down, like, how do you know what house to put on which lot, right? And you don't want to cut down on what a buyer is going to do, because if you have a foundation and they decide not to buy that lot, then you're stuck with the foundation, right? To eventually go to a spec or something else.
That's one of the benefits of Mark System sales approach is you can actually limit which foundation or which house plans can go. So if you end up wanting to do batch foundations and then you go set that so that they can't sell a house that doesn't fit, it enables the system, makes the right way easy and the wrong way hard. It enables you to be able to do that if that's a decision. If you don't have the ability to create a single foundation that works for 9 layouts, okay, are we willing to limit these sites to these models elevation combinations? And if so, then do that. That's a reasonable middle ground there.
Yeah, well, that's a cool thing to say too, because it kind of ties in search as well with the interactivity that you have there. So you can then just limit the selections that you offer through InSearch and the interactive floor plans and which models are there, and then even the, like you said, the foundations and stuff. And so you can still allow the builders or the buyers that flexibility to see options and to play options and bring themselves further down the purchase funnel without showing them everything, like what they can't have is what my point is. You can set
that it's a good observation. InSearch as a solution there, because if they can't have the sunroom, why tell them they almost were able to?
Right.
That's a pretty lousy spot for anybody. So just it's not available. But you only have to say it's not available. The system literally prevents it from being seen. So you're not like, yeah, you can't choose these 19, but would you like this one? I mean, that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're only showing them exactly what is available. And then with lot view, you have that, then those are the plans that pop up on the lot view for the specific lot. And then you just choose exactly what you've laid out for that specific lot. And they're none the wiser that they could have been any other house that you offer. So.
Yeah, and if they're like, well, the model home has a sunroom, like, well, certainly. And if you wanted that, there's several lots that does work.
Yeah, you can move to a different lot then. Yeah, that doesn't work on this lot. Yeah, so that's exactly. I like it. And then just on stage releases, you talked a lot about that. And so what would you like? How far down on stage releases would you kind of go if you have to continue down that route?
Yeah, eventually I did actually, you brought it up and we probably got another couple, we got a minute or two. I'll throw in one extra piece on stage releases that's I think is really interesting, but I didn't get down to this level. But if anyone's still here, they'll be interested. A lot of times, and again, if people, I mean, Monica, in my line of work, I meet two types of people: the kind that try to tell you that what you're thinking won't work, and the kind that you're working with that are trying to figure out how to make it work. And if you're working with the former, I'm too old and don't need that in my life, because just simply arguing with somebody about how something could be, it's like, good grief, why? So if you're in the mindset, how can we make this work? If you were to say a customer needs choice, like we got to give them these 70 choices on a spec home. So got it. If it's a spec home, they're obviously not choosing their model elevation and sunroom, but they're going to choose cabinets, countertops, flooring, faucets, and a dozen other things. Like, okay, but yet we got to get these homes done soon. That the point here is that there's an urgency. We didn't have to start goals, and we got to make some adaptations to hit plan in the end. Well, in those cases, you're calling your stage release up through prior to cabinets and countertop, for instance. And the downside is it's 10 weeks from cabinets to close normally. But we need our specs to be able to be done in 4 weeks or whatever the case is. These numbers may not be right, but just stick with me for a moment. The idea is, well, cabinets and countertops, if we allow that choice, it needs to be 8 weeks, because that's what the time frame is. But man, what if a handful of cabinet choices were available faster than the other 20? What if there's 3 cabinet choices that we say to our cabinet supplier, all right, listen, I ain't asking you to have 20 choices in every box available in a 2-week window. But what if you limit it to these 3 selections? That still gives some choice, an actual choice. You got dark, medium, and light, whatever it is. And you still, but those ones are available in a time frame that's necessary. Or same with flooring. Don't allow tile in some cases, but any hardwood you choose, or LVP. So reduce those offerings. So the point here is you align your stage releases with the offerings, so that if you want to be in 4 weeks, we can make that happen. And we even give you the choice of these 3. You don't have all 20 choices, but you got these 3. Here's your flooring options. And we work with our trade suppliers to be able to support those handful, very short, small amount. And so you can stage release those houses to be up against that whatever that one is, and then actually prevent the options that they can't choose from being seen based on stage release cutoffs and the options. And then they can simply choose which one. So like I said earlier, originally my preference is one stage release. We just release a house and it's done. But it's a very reasonable place to go to when you need to pull some levers, because the last lever that I'm okay with is telling construction you just got to build faster. I've released a house to production literally on November 23rd and closed it the same year, and it didn't go well. That caused us some pain. Went out on Christmas and I saw the cabinet installer installing cabinets on Christmas morning with his kid. Like, that's not the answer.
Right.
So you back office operators are saying just construction figured out. No way, that's not the answer. We do everything we can in order to make sure that we're accommodating, we're cutting out and being really creative about those solutions. And by golly, if we're sitting around trying to think about how to make it work, we'll come up with some stuff. It ain't gonna be easy. I mean, this stuff doesn't just work out on its own. That's why we get paid. We're here because the system doesn't do it on its own. That's come up with some solutions here. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I like this a lot because it really is getting you, so again, you're not hitting the end of the year, not meeting your targets or your goals with only 2 months left to build 50 houses for whatever you need, right, to close out the year the way you had planned to. And this is, again, build faster is not always the answer, and especially with the trade shortages and everything else that you have to deal with in the field in order to get everything put together in a timely fashion. And I think another benefit from doing a lot of this is it really stretches you and your team to look at where we can be more efficient as a builder and what we're offering. Like, right, when we look at the foundations, do we really need to offer those many different options and plans and things to our buyers? Or let's look at what's most popular, what's selling most, where are we making the most money, and let's cut off some of these things that we're planning for that aren't getting sold. And that's doing the foundations ahead of time kind of forces you to have that sort of mentality and to think through that. And then same with the staged releases. I like how you said, let's figure out what can we offer, to a normal process, but then what are the things that we have that we can offer quickly? And if we start really looking at that, we start thinking also about, like, do we need to offer buyers 20 options, right? Because there's option fatigue at some point, and maybe we don't need 20 options. Maybe we can go just to those 3 options. And if we do that, then it shortens our build time or notification time for the cabinets. And then we're building houses faster. So then you can, during the year, as you're pulling on these levers and you're moving forward, you're now starting to look into 2027, if you will, on how can we now look at building homes faster. So that's going to be our next webinar, hopefully.
It's coming up. Yeah, in that foresight can be 2020. I remember because we did, I think, October.
Yes, we'll have to share that link.
Like, holy smokes, the first quarter of 25, and this, in that case, is already in the books. Like, you'll definitely hit plan.
Right, exactly, because you know what you're going to build, right? Exactly, what you're going to close. So cool. Well, I really like this, and I think I think one of the hardest webinars we could possibly do is how do you actually keep your data clean enough so that you can manage from your data and immediately start to see these numbers and these things fly for you. But that's a whole nother topic. So we got the end of
the 2 minutes. We won't do that one justice.
No, I don't think we'll cover that one at all. So I'll let you kind of close things out. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Like we said, we'll share this on-demand session. But Matt, do you have any closing comments you want to leave us with?
Contact info is up there. If you can't tell, I love talking about this stuff. So I know you do too, Monica. So happy anybody reaches out, happy to give any resources that I mentioned, or go to the resources tab. You'll see everything that I'm talking about. And as soon as Monica Terrell send us this link here in the next couple of days after it's processed, we'll stick this one up there too. So I really appreciate Mark Systems, ECI, for hosting as always. You guys are a great partner, and glad to be along the ride here with you.
Awesome, thank you. And just because you said that, how much you love talking about this, I want to share the one comment that we got. This is a passionate presenter. Just wanted to say your presentation skills are exceptional, clear, engaging, and very easy to follow. Really appreciate the way you're delivering this content. So thank you, and thanks to our audience. That was, yeah, right, it was.
That's my wife.
It was Jason Sherman. Remember, he was here earlier. I'm just kidding. Anyway.
Whoever said that, I enjoy it. I get worked up. Very few people get as worked up about this stuff as I do, but most of you do, and Monica, you do too. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today, and I hope you learned a little bit. And again, feel free to watch this as much as you want to, because I probably will watch it again too. All right, take care. Have a good day.